Welcome back, everybody. New season, new start, new episode. The Dynasty, a podcast on the Alabama Crimson Tide. Don't forget, new episodes dropping each week. Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you happen to get the podcast. And if you're looking for the show, just go to thedynastybama.com. Wherever you're listening, we ask you rate, review, and share across social media at The Dynasty Bama. Coming up today, Peter Burns from ESPN of the SEC Network joins us talking about the SEC spring meetings and also the NCAA baseball tournament, which, as usual, has a heavy SEC look to it, and especially a great shade of crimson that is there as well. We'll talk about the Tide. Also on threes, Chris Lowe will join us talking about his story on Ryan Coleman-Williams and his Hollywood primed for a bounce back season. And plus, for the second off season in a row, Alabama basketball will get a big time freshman back for his sophomore year. I'm Chris Stewart, Trent Richardson alongside, and AJ McCarron back with us next week. But Coach McCarron busy right now with the Birmingham Stallions. But we have a great guest joining us out of the chute, longtime friend for all of us here from the SEC Network, and you hear him on all the ESPN platforms, Sirius XM Radio as well. Peter Burns, good to see you, sir. I guess it speaks to your work ethic that your tan is serviceable, but not phenomenal as you've come back from the
Wait a minute.
SEC.
Come on, man. I mean, it was just SEC spring meetings. I'm looking good. It's not like I
didn't say bad.
I mean, come on. Hey, Trent, I kind of heard that was Chris taking a little bit of a knock on my tan right now.
Oh, it was a little bit of a knock, but it wasn't a big knock. I was complimenting the work because you clearly were inside a good bit working.
It was that's always fun because we come back from spring meetings. You can tell which coaches haven't been out in the sun for the longest time, and then all of a sudden you watch Lane Kiffin come in and he looks like just tan leather because he's been on the damn boat so much. So it's been a good trip, man. It's been wild this time of year, man. We got spring meetings going into baseball. I don't know if I'm coming or going, but happy to be on with you boys.
Yeah, great to have you on with us. And so, give me the biggest takeaway for you from Destin.
I think the biggest takeaway is just kind of the takeaway I've had maybe over the last two years over at spring meetings, guys, is the fact that there's just frustration in the air that no matter what they come up with, they don't feel like they have an opportunity to really truly make a change, right? Because now they're trying to find out how to fix problems. Every time they fix something, four more doors open up. That's just a pain in their what. So I think there's a lot of discussion about the playoff size. I think there was more of gathering information about the college football playoff committee and like, hey, if you're Alabama, does it make sense to schedule a hard out of conference game, or do you run it kind of like how Indiana and some of the other teams have done it, just play nobody in non-conference, especially with the non-conference games. So, Trent, there's just a bunch of different ways in that I felt like Kalen DeBoer has a good feel on it, but I still feel that there was frustration that they can't come up with any kind of concrete solutions right now.
So tell me this: it is when you're talking about the top priorities when you get to these meetings. I know every year it's almost like that one. What do you think Greg Sankey his top priority is right now when it comes to how can we handle this playoff situation?
Yeah, Trent, I think for him, the top priority I always get from Sankey is that why are we in a rush to change the playoff size?
Mm.
Okay. And I think that's the biggest thing is the fact of like, I liken it to like we have a bathtub full of water right now and it's chaotic. We can't get the damn temperature right. So we turn on this, faucet full speed and we turn on this faucet full speed and we bitch and moan and complain about not having, the water the right temperature. So I think what I like about Sankey is that Sankey's like, listen, there's so much changing with NIL and 9-game conference schedule and transfer portal and all these rules. Let's not change the playoff size right now. I don't think he's opposed to changing it, whether it goes to 16 or maybe even one day down the road 24. But why are we running to make that change right now? And I think that's the one thing I took away from it, Chris, is the fact that when I sat there, everyone wants to just know what the changes are, but Sankey's also telling them, "Hey, let's fix a bunch of other issues or see what happens before that we completely just change the makeup of the sport." Because I don't feel like we lost a ton going from 4 to 12. Okay, I think the regular season even actually meant more. What I am worried about is that if we go from 12 or 16 teams to 24, does the Iron Bowl still mean what it's supposed to mean? Does Alabama Tennessee still mean what it's supposed to mean? Those are the questions I have.
Yeah, and I understand why you say that. To me, it almost seems to show that the SEC still has the leverage, and while the Big Ten may be slightly ahead at the moment, they're trying to position themselves to stay there, and everybody else is trying to figure out how to keep the SEC within its sights. They always seem, especially this talk about the game the week before what we call Iron Bowl Saturday,
You know,
but
cupcake week.
everybody's got those, and they talk about, well, the SEC should play tougher, schedule tougher. Why? It's smart to have it on your schedule because if you're Alabama, yes, you're going to have the Iron Bowl next. Then there's a really good chance, historically speaking, that you're going to have the SEC championship game. And now you're going to have multiple weeks of the playoff. Why would you not build in your unscheduled, if you will, bye week right
Mhm.
there?
Yeah, and especially going now from, it just depends on how the season kinda wears on, like, having just, 9 conference games and then only having 1 bye, it's wild to me, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's what we're gonna have this year. You're playing a murderer's row. I mean, I look at LSU's schedule, right? They got 8 games in a row before their bye, and I think after the bye is, I wanna say, Alabama, Texas, and Tennessee. Great teams, and, oh, by the way, you got Clemson at the front end. Why are you playing these harder games? It used to be because the College Football Playoff Committee would say, "We're going to honor that,"
Yeah.
but that's the reason why is they look at it going, "Wait a minute, if you're gonna tell me 10 and 2 in the Big 12 is the same as SEC 10 and 2 or same as SEC 9 and 3, that's probably the biggest frustration that all of the athletic directors and the coaches have right now of going, "Hey, nobody has to play this hard of a schedule." I mean, Texas Tech, their coach got all upset because of what Sark was saying about how, I mean, we could have run our 2s and 3s and still won in Texas Tech's schedule. And the fact is Texas Tech could have had their 2s and 3s plays and still probably finished the same in the Big 12
Right.
schedule. Just not all schedules, Trent, man, not all schedules are created equal. I mean, that football in the Big 12 and the ACC week to week to week is not like SEC football is week to week to week.
Yeah, and that's my biggest thing. Like, why have these guys at another SEC game, and you still got to play the SEC championship? And I think Kirby said it best. At the end of the game when they played Alabama in the SEC championship, he said, "Man, that's a good team. That team beat up. We're beat up." I think Kirby was so tired mentally, and physically too, that it was like, man, bro, it is a gauntlet on both. Like, it's not a both sides no more. It's like it's one
Yeah.
big lead, and now it's any given Saturday, and it's one of those things to where, like, is it worth playing Ohio State? Is it worth playing these guys that's not in the SEC? And I get it. I'm more for the player. Um, and I definitely get, it's a business side to it, being older. But at the same time, man, like, how can we protect our boys? And I mean, and possibly our program and some of our, administration with this, right?
Trent, so I want to go back real quick. I know it's y'all's podcast, but I want to ask a question, right? Like whenever we go back into that week that y'all would play somebody before the Iron Bowl, okay, and it'd be a little bit of not as big of a stronger as opponent as anybody in the SEC. How did y'all view that from a player? Was it a breath of fresh air, or was it, man, we don't want to do this? Like we'd rather go play somebody that had some ilk to it.
I'll answer it for him real quick. It was it was hell because Nick Saban after the
Listen, I was just
Mississippi
about to
State,
say this.
I
There
did
you
his
go.
TV show and we would do it on the field if it was on the road after, a road game. And as cantankerous as I've ever seen the man was Starkville, Mississippi, right after a great win because you had that game next, and he knew next week started that night,
Yeah.
and he was going to have his work cut out for him to absolutely keep those guys locked in and focused. And you take it from there, Trent.
Listen, I agree with everything you just said. I was gonna say the same exact thing. The hardest practices was when we played those teams that, that didn't have a ranking or people didn't think they had a chance of being in a game with us. That was that. Listen, that was the toughest time, and I think for us, that's why it was more like, hey, we should have played somebody else. Let's play somebody else bigger, so the week ain't like this. We're going through the whole week. So, to me, on both sides of it, man. But I definitely get that. Like, man, we should have played, such and such because this game boring. But at the same time, man, that week, whew, man, Nick had it out for us. When you had that week and you have a bye week, like, oh man, those are the worst 2 weeks when it comes to Bama practice. When it comes to getting ready for a game situation, that to me, like, cause you go back to camp days when we got bye weeks, like that's how Nick did it. And it was just like, bro, camp days, those long days that never ends. But I get both sides of it. Um and yeah, it's almost tough as a player to be like, yeah, I want to play somebody, that's not tough and this and that. But as a player, you want to compete all the time and put it out there that you're the best at all time. But when it comes to protecting these guys, like, because a lot of these guys going to be beat up when it comes to getting to that combine day, and it comes to the pro bowl. I mean, them pro days and stuff too. And so with the season being so long and how it's jumping up from, from 12 to 16 to 16 to 24, it's going to be a lot of bad football too.
Yeah.
That's what people don't realize.
Well, and I go back to it and talk about guys getting banged up. I remember, Chris, I worked in Denver before I worked for the SEC Network, so I was close to the Denver Broncos organization. I remember that was a year they were going to think about taking Eddie Lacy in the draft. And I remember asking, they're like, "Hey, why didn't they take Eddie Lacy at the time?" I want to say they went with Monte Ball or somebody like that. I couldn't remember. And I asked, and they said they were worried that Eddie and Alabama players, especially running backs, were so beat up because of how physical the practice were and stuff like that, about how you were so afraid to ever take a day off if you were a little bit banged up, simply for the fact that another 5-star might replace you. And that was one of the things that the Broncos were like, "Now we're gonna go a different direction than Eddie Lacy," which was wild back in the day thinking about it, because the success that guys like you and Eddie and all those guys had in college. Like, to think about that's how crazy it is in practice every day. I mean, that's wild. Wild to think about.
Yeah, so that's just like what you said, like when it comes to conference play, like we're on a different sliding scale. But even that comment that you just made, like, and I tell people all the time about, hey man, like when you play at Alabama, it's almost like it's a blessing and a curse at the same time, because people think like that. Like what you just said, that whole operation with, he might be beat up from practices and, he's never had a break. He's scared to, take a day off. Like, you get that stigma when you come from Alabama or a place like Georgia now, right? So you
Yeah.
get that, you get that type of stigma. And so I tell people all the time, man, when you go into the league coming from a place like Alabama and Georgia, you're a 5-year vet automatically. That's how they look at you. And so that's crazy what you just said.
Mhm.
Hey, Peter, let's go from the gridiron to the diamond, and you stay really busy with that. Um, Alabama gets a chance to not only host a regional, but a super for the first time in 20 years. Kind of ironic. We had the anniversary just a couple weeks ago, big reunion, 5 major leaguers off the '06 SEC championship squad for Alabama: Alex Avila, Tommy Hunter, just David Robertson, just to name 3 off of that squad. They're back in Tuscaloosa. We're talking about the good old days, and now it feels like we're back there. We're moving back that direction anyway. Talk about your perspective of what's happened. Rob Vaughn, coming
Hmm.
in, eh, adding to what was in place and taking it now to that next level as the head coach of the Crimson Tide baseball team.
Yeah, I mean, you just see it, and you go back and look at even years ago, whenever the stadium was kind of built up a little bit more, and all of a sudden you're like, all right, let's wait. Then there was because there was a foundation there, but then when Rob steps in, it felt different. Okay,
Mhm.
and I look at this, and to have guys that aren't just good players but great people is a mark of what you're creating. And I mean, I look at Justin LeBron, and I had him on my show a couple of days ago, and I'm like, dude, this guy, he should run for mayor. Like, it just seemed like he was
Yeah,
such a good kid and easy to pull for, and you're sitting
right.
there going, I mean, he's got not only the power, but he's got the speed as well too, and I think that's the thing. And by the way, can I get this off of my chest just real quick? Okay, I have to do it. Like, maybe they don't trust me, maybe they don't trust or Chris. Trevor, you need to get in there and just create this when you go in front of the NCAA and say, anytime that you earn a regional
Oh,
seed, you
I know
should
where you're
be the
going.
home team in every single
Yes.
game that you play.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
Bama, if I'm not mistaken,
Ah,
I'm watching the game against Oklahoma State, the
yes.
big home run in the top of the 8th, it was amazing, and the crowd goes wild, and I'm like, "Ugh." And then, obviously, the monster home run there in the, what is it, in the 11th for Brady
Right.
Neal,
Yeah.
that should be the walk-off. That should
No
be the
doubt.
moment. You're in the winner's bracket, and yet you're not the home team, like, come on.
I
We
was
gotta change that up
concerned.
going forward.
I'm not gonna kid you. I was concerned before that if something great happens, don't go running out on the field.
Mm.
Seriously.
You
Well,
know,
because that's what you're
it's
used to. You're in your own dugout, you
yeah,
go yard. What
yeah.
else would you do in the
Don't
extras?
don't mess it up technically by running out on the field. And I'm with you. It's not great, but it is great to see Alabama back in this position. I know that's just what the SEC is part of, but to see Alabama back, you get a national seed, you get a chance to host. Um, they've done it with really good starting pitching, but they swing the bats extremely
Mm.
well, and they just got a couple of those guys. In Brady Neal, to me, is where it starts when you're talking baseball. He's just one of those dudes.
Eric Hines, another one. I mean, obviously,
A
what he
local guy
did.
too,
Yeah, and I mean, again, kinda looks like a mini Bo Jackson sometimes
no
when you get
doubt.
up there, just like with the size and the stature that he has, and then you get what I like about it is that not only that it's the fact that you got some transfers, guys that come in, some upperclassmen, you got Miles Upchurch, you got some guys that literally are just hitting the ground running, and that's what you need, and it's hard to have any type of camaraderie in a team atmosphere. But anytime that
Yeah,
we interview Rob Vaughn, I mean, even last night, he's talking about, man, how great of a game that was. And I feel like baseball and softball are still the purest two sports that we have in college athletics. And so when I see Patrick Murphy having that success, when I see Rob having that success, it brings a little joy to my heart because I feel like, those are the sports that, you know, there are a lot of great things happening on, as opposed to the first 15 minutes of this conversation, we were talking a
yeah,
lot about, what's wrong in college football. I think there's a whole lot of right in college
sure.
athletics as well too, and we see that with softball and baseball right now.
Hey, last thing from me, Trent, if you got something, jump in. But last thing from me, I'm glad you brought up Patrick Murphy because Bama softball is we visit here in the winners bracket, undefeated, chance to win this thing for the second time, and it looks really, really good for them. But you mentioned Pat Murphy, and I've said this time I was introducing him once, and I said we talk about how great a coach he is. He may be the best teammate
Hmm.
on the Alabama campus because of who he is, and he is somebody that everybody can pull for and be excited for because of just who he is and the way he goes about his business.
Yeah, and again, I like it because I mean, I do a daily Sirius XM show, and then in studio, I'll be doing a bunch of our work for SEC Network. I'll just get a text from him, and he's just watching the game,
I know.
and I I think that's the realness of it. Like, a
Yeah.
lot of people, when we see these coaches, whether it be Kalen DeBoer or Kirby Smart, we look at them as such like a deity because we compared them to the Nick Sabans of the world, like they don't
Right.
have normal lives as well too. But then, for Murph, he's just genuinely happy, and he also opens up as well too about, hey, battles that he's had and things that he wanted to take to the next level. So again, man, to see that whole team come together, and then with Nate Oates, I mean, I get jealous as an LSU fan right now because I look at all of the chaos that's going down in Baton Rouge, and then I go to places and I look at what Greg Byrne has to deal with, and I'm like, okay, playoff team in football. Baseball is going to be, hosting a super regional. You got softball playing for a championship right now. Yeah, you'll be all right. Things are okay there over there in T-Town.
Yeah, they are. And as our man Steve Gorgie points out, and you got a chance to work with this guy before we did, but you know how great he is. Just posts out on the screen: college football playoff, Sweet 16, Super Regional, and Women's College World Series. Greg Byrne kind of knows what he's doing when it comes to hiring, doesn't he?
He's done well. It just
Yeah.
it just means more down there. Although I will say this in closing, I got Trent, I'm gonna have to go out there and get I need to find out if I have any highlights. I just got golf flags. You got all of your highlights when you were a player. So I need to see if I got any highlights that I can put up there because your background looks a whole hell of a lot better than mine does, my man.
It's funny, man. My brother give me a lot of stuff, and he get a lot of stuff from my kids and stuff that I don't even know where it's at, and I've never seen sometime. And man, my family come in, they try to do the walls, and they, if I go somewhere we want to go, they want to take some of the stuff with us. If I got to shoot a show, because they want, Dad, you got to have your background and stuff like that. Man, I just love it, man. It's just one of those things that that keeps you grounded when you got a family, man.
It looks good, and Chris, we can get that Trent Richardson necklace for you next time. That would
Here's the
look
thing.
good, man. I think you can rock that.
Mine would have to be made out of old bottle caps, but bottle cap rings, because I ain't strong enough to hold that up. I'd have to go ultra aluminum
Hey,
for me.
whatever
Hey,
works, man. Whatever works.
you're awesome. Great to talk to you. Love watching on all the different platforms and listening to you as well. We appreciate you taking
Thanks,
time to be
boys.
on with us. Appreciate
Appreciate you,
you.
man.
That dude is the best. Peter Burns, kind enough to join us here on the Dynasty, a podcast on the Alabama Crimson Tide. Coming up, Chris Lowe joining us, another good dude. Stay with us. We're back right after this. So many people assume weight gain, fatigue, joint discomfort, it's all just part of getting older. But doctors are actually kind of learning now that many of these issues may be connected to your metabolic health, inflammation in the body, whatever they're learning. I'm the old guy on the show. I'm just glad they're starting to figure it out, and we can learn what we need to do to help.
Dr. Alex Casey at Birmingham Health is an Alabama native and former football player who works with patients every day to help them better understand how their bodies are functioning.
Dr. Casey specializes in chronic pain, neuropathy, which I've dealt with, non-surgical, non-narcotic solutions, helping patients lead pain-free, healthier lives.
Whether you're an athlete or a parent, he's committed to helping you feel better. And trust me, being a parent sometimes is way harder than going up against the SEC defense.
And Dr. Casey and his medical team at Birmingham Health are conveniently located in Bluff Park.
Call 659-247-3888 to schedule your appointment with Dr. Casey today and start your journey to better health.
All right, let me ask you this. Has anything in your house ever broken at the worst time possible?
Yeah, for me, it's almost always like it's middle of summer. Your AC's gone. Now I'm sweating. Not that that takes much. And I'm stressed, which also doesn't take much. But that's why Autumn Air actually caught our attention.
They got financing options that don't feel like you're taking out a second mortgage.
And if you do one of their whole home protection plans, it basically covers everything: AC, plumbing, and electrical.
Oh, so you mean all the stuff that you don't want to deal with?
Exactly, Trent. So instead of panicking when something breaks, you've already got it handled, which is a way better game plan. Welcome back, everybody, to the Dynasty, a podcast on the Alabama Crimson Tide. A.J. McCarron back with us next week. Coach is busy these days, but glad, as always, to have my partner, Trent Richardson, here. And we are pleased to welcome in from On3, one of the most respected guys in the industry, Chris Lowe, kind enough to spend a few minutes with us. Chris, the downtime in terms of the season means it's not downtime for guys like you. You get a chance to get into more meat of stories. Sometimes you have to search, sometimes you don't, but you get a chance to expound a little bit, elaborate a little bit on some different things, and we appreciate you taking time to be with us.
Man, I'm glad you guys asked me. It's good to be with Bama royalty, Chris Stewart and Trent Richardson. You don't get that opportunity every day.
He's royalty. I'm just the joker in the King's Court if I'm involved at all. But hey, let's talk about the story you've got on Ryan Coleman-Williams, and I'm practicing so hard trying to get accustomed to saying that so that I don't mess it up when I'm doing play-by-play. But a guy who was talked about extensively before he ever set foot on campus, obviously has been talked about the entire time he's been here, some good, some bad. Never bad about him personally,
Right.
but always about what might be playing wise. Tell us just kind of a thumbnail of your story and kind of a takeaway or two that you got from your opportunity to put this piece together.
Okay, yeah. I got a chance to sort of get to know Ryan as a freshman and sort of hit it off. And much like Trent Richardson back in the day. And just I wanted to do something and sit down with him, this offseason to talk about where he was mentally, physically, emotionally. And let's start, sort of where he is physically because, he talked about how much better he felt. He's about 182 pounds. I think he weighed 155 soaking wet when he got on campus as a freshman. He looks much bigger. Just for me, having been around him, and I'm not on the practice field every day. But, you guys know this. Trey, you know this, man. When you wanna know about a kid, how he's looked, how he's playing, how he's moving, you talk to the guys that are out there with him every day. So I talked to Xavier Brown. I said, "Tell me,
Mhm.
give me your what do you see?" And he just sort of shook his head. He says, "Man, he's in and out of his cuts. He's so explosive. He looks like a bigger version of Ryan as a freshman." He said, "He lit us up a couple times out there this spring." He said, he's gonna roll. And so I always like to talk to guys, teammates. These guys are competitive. You get out on the field, corners against receivers. I mean, they're going at it. And that's the thing that jumped out to me. One of the first things as far as is Ryan on the field, and Kalen sort of told me the same thing. He had a great spring and just looked like he was in a better place and, healthy. I don't think he really was ever completely healthy, and Ryan said, "Hey, Chris, that's not an excuse, man. You gotta football's football. You gotta get up and play that next play." But I don't think he did a lot of there were a lot of weeks where he didn't do much in the weeks leading up to the game, and that hurt. You never sort of fully get into that football rhythm if you're not practicing as much. And you had that concussion, I think was the FSU game, the opener, and that set him back. But he had a hamstring. There were just a lot of things, and I think mentally he admitted to me that he didn't balance a lot of things, with the he's on the football cover, EA Sports, getting pulled and tugged in a lot of different directions. I can't imagine this day and age when you're somebody, a player of his stature at a place like Alabama, how difficult that is. And he is young. I mean, gosh, I pick at him all the time. When Nick was hired as coach, he wasn't even born. When Nick Saban was hired in 2007 or whatever it was, Ryan, Ryan Coleman-Williams was just a twinkle in his mom's eye. And, so I think he's been able to sort of balance some of those things, get to a better place. He loves his life now. He's getting ready to be a father. I think the little guys do. Sir hyphen Ryan. People ask me, I got a ton of notes from Alabama fans. How do you pronounce that? I'm like, it's Sir Ryan. And, of course, he's getting married. He's been engaged now for several months. His family all lives with him there in Tuscaloosa. Just my takeaway and spending some time with him is he's really in a good place emotionally and mentally. And,
Yeah, my my
I just
biggest
hope he
thing.
stays healthy because I think he's going to have a big year.
Yeah, and one thing I try to preach to people and tell people, man, like you said, Ryan got a heart like I do, and I get it. It's hard to tell people no. He's always smiling. He's always, keeping a good head on his shoulder. Um, and he's always about everybody else, you know. And so when you got a guy like that, man, your heart is built of gold, and it's hard to break you. And Ryan is the type of person that takes the punch for everybody else, and so much to where he don't even realize that it's bothering him. He's such of a good guy, and he's such of a leader to where in his head mentally, all right, I'll take that punch. Team winning, we still having success. I'll take that punch. It is what it is. All right, they're gonna double team me or they're gonna switch me up in this position or something I'm not used to. I'm gonna work it out to where I'm gonna be that guy that they can count on all phases. Even though it's not going his way, he's still taking that punch for everybody else. And so one thing about the NFL for me, I didn't like when people tried to reach out and rip me away from my family. What got me there? And so what I don't want to have with that kid, because I know it's a lot going on. He's getting ready to have a child, and then we talking about stuff off the field. And I speak the mindset, I speak mentally. Man, I don't want the kid to get to a place to where football can be great for him. But if you try to rip something away from him that has always been, it can get ugly real fast. And so you tell them, and I look at it from a father perspective, and they look at it from a player's perspective, that somebody that's went through this. Like, man, young fella, just keep playing. Do you keep your head down? They say he's getting stronger. They say he's getting faster. He's in and out the cuts. Man, just keep leading and putting your head down.
Tell me, Chris, your perspective on what his reasoning was, and was he ever in danger of leave? What was his reasoning for staying? And do you think he was ever in danger of leaving Tuscaloosa?
Yeah, we talked about that. It's in this era, certainly a kid like that didn't have a great year. Probably wasn't, even though as Trent said, he never showed, he never pouted. Um, Probably wasn't in the best place. Those kids other schools draw big circles around those type of kids. Let's see if we can get them away and let him start anew here. So yeah, he had a lot of people tugging. He could have commanded a lot of money. But no, I don't think that's something. He's a Mobile kid. He grew up down in that area in Alabama. His was played at Auburn, but it's that state is, he's entrenched there. And he said, "Listen, man, I grew up watching Alabama football, watching the Tide win national championships. I came here. I came here initially when Nick Saban was the coach and briefly decommitted, and then recommitted to Alabama once Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb were able to talk to him." He said, I just didn't want to. I didn't want to sort of start that legacy or start working on that legacy and then leave. And I think there's always kids that are wired the right way, and I think Ryan is. When you don't have the kind of year you want to have, you really it's sort of hard to walk away, in that type of year and go somewhere else, especially when you've been as decorated as he was in that state. And I think he's the only two-time winner of Mr. Football in the state of Alabama, and had such a tremendous freshman season. And I think Trent touched on this. When I talked to Kalen about Ryan for this story, he said every time they talk, he was like, "Coach, the team needs this, the team needs that." And he said, "Fine, hey, listen, Ryan, let's talk about you, man. Talk about you. What do you need? Where can we help you? We need to get you back to being you." And he just said he's so team oriented that was always sort of the first place he would start. So to answer your question, I just don't think that was ever in his heart to leave Alabama. I don't think he ever really wanted to. He's entrenched there. And I think he also wants to be, all those, think of all those kids that played there over the last 2 decades. just about all of them, except for these last couple classes, have won championships of some type, an SEC title, a national title. And trust me, when you sit down and talk to Ryan Coleman-Williams, he's not talking about catching 70 or 80 balls or winning the Blitnikoff Award. He's talking about winning a national championship. And he said, that's the reason you come to Alabama. I know Trent can relate. You come to Alabama, be a part of that tradition, to be a part of that program, to continue stacking those trophies on top of each other. I think that's sort of what not sort of, it is his focus. And there are a lot of guys like a Xavier Brown, like a Ryan Coleman-Williams now, who've been there in the program the whole time playing for just Coach DeBoer. And they understand what the narrative is that, nobody's won one without Coach Saban. Well, it goes the same way with the players. We don't want to be that group that, we came after Coach Saban retired and we never won a title. It's on us too. So they understand that that's out there. And I think that's a big reason, that he elected to stay.
Trent, you got anything for him?
Scheduling. Let's get into scheduling, man. What do you think about like far as how can he put more stuff in perspective of like the stuff that he does have off field and the stuff that he does have on the field, like, and just prioritizing the right situation when it comes to because me and Dre used to have this thing, man. Kirkpatrick, that was my roommate. I think we was put together. We actually got to choose who was going to be our roommate, but spiritually, I think we was put together for a reason. Dre had his son, which is Dre Kirk Jr. He had him in high school. I had my daughter when I was in high school, and I actually had my youngest daughter when I was in high school. And so when we was at class, we had our classes set up. He would set up his schedule to where when he was at school, Dre would, I was watching Little Man. That's our nickname for him. And when I was doing school stuff, he was watching Slim Veer. And so it was a productive thing. And so, like, far as scheduling, like, how can that work out for him with being married, kids, all that type of stuff?
I think he's learned, Trent, probably the most important word in the English language. And he uses that word more than he used to. You know what that word is? No. He's not allow himself to be pulled in so many directions. And it's hard, it's hard to say no. And, you've got responsibilities in the NIL world you have to take care of. But I think he's also been able to sort of stagger those better. I know in talking to Kalen and some of the guys on that team, he oftentimes was one of the last ones off the practice field. There's a couple freshmen on his team that he really loves, has worked hard with, and the thing that he's really, concentration, he dropped a ton of passes last year. And he's a lot of times that was just him, just merely concentration, which goes back to repetition and work and doing things over and over again. Sometimes trying to do too much after the catch. So I think he has really thrown himself into being a better football player, Trent. Future husband, future dad. He already has a stepson. Alexis had a son that he's taken under his wing. And I think that's been a big part. And then having his mom, I talked to his mom, great lady. I think she's helped keep him grounded too. To remind him, hey, what's important, what's not. This can wait. You go be you. I think her quote to me was, you lock in, Ryan. You lock in on what's important. Okay. We got you here. We got you on the periphery. We're here at the house, whatever you need, but you lock in on what you need to do to be the best player you need to be. And I think that's what he's done based on my time with him and talking to the people around him, both in that program and in his family.
Tell us about a story you got out now, dealing with Pete Golding, Ole Miss. Again, we can talk Lane Kiffin all we want, but Pete Golding can be as polarizing, even though it's a newer spotlight for him. But I mean, Pete's a guy that's been talked about in coaching circles, much like Lane, since he's been a part of the SEC. So tell us about this story and kind of where things are for Golden, because he's clearly not pulling any punches on things.
No, Pete is unabashedly who he is. And he'll tell you that. He's not going to try to be anybody. He's not a guy who's going to go on social media or make media tour and try to win friends or schmooze. That's just not who he is. And the thing about Pete is, when Nick Saban found him, I remember Nick looking for a DC, and he told some people, "Listen, I want to go find the next young Will Muschamp. Go find me that guy." And here's this guy at UTSA, scruffy beard, the wild hair, and had come dad's a high school coach for 4 or 5 decades, and he'd done a lot of really good things at the lower level, and had done some things that were unique defensively. And your typical Nick brings him in and gets him on the whiteboard for 6 or 7 hours. You're getting ready to play Clemson. When Pete he could tell the story a lot better than I can. They're going to play Clemson that year in the semifinals, and the whole staff's in that room, the staff room just adjacent to Nick's office, and he's got all this stuff up there. He wants them to scheme up against certain offenses, and Pete's like, "Wait a minute, this is Clemson's offense. This is their quarterback +1 stuff that they were doing then with Kelly Bryant." So obviously, Nick never missed he was always a step ahead. He never missed a chance and opportunity to gain an advantage. And Nick was impressed. They hired him that night, and he never even had coached at the Power 4 level.
Yeah.
He'd been at UTSA, Southern Miss, I think Tusculum, Delta State, and spends 4 years at Alabama and gets to Ole Miss. And you're right. I think it's Lane is in his own way, such a polarizing guy. Pete now is certainly caught the spotlight that a lot of people don't want to catch. And see the way investigating tampering allegations made by Dabo. And I think not that Pete has really come out and talked about it on the record, but Ole Miss's stance, okay, if we're really going to enforce tampering, let's enforce it across the board, which could lead to utter chaos in college sports. Because what was the old saying in the SEC back in the day, that if you're not cheating, you're not trying?
Yeah.
If you're not tampering, before the portal opens, or not talking to kids, I'm not saying it's not fair to paint the broad brush and say everybody's doing it, but I'd say there's some degree. And I think Ole Miss has kept receipts, but clearly there's a lot of confidence there from the players. I talked to Trinidad Chambliss about Pete, sort of what his stamp is and what they like about him. Keith Carter, the AD who hired him, sort of likes his approach and the way he's come in and not been a guy that wants to be necessarily a rock star off the field. He just wants to coach football, do it his way, and is certainly a fight back kind of guy. Whether you agree with it or don't agree with it, that's sort of what he's been. But no, this will be I think there's a lot that will be fascinating about this year. When you look at Pete Golding and Ole Miss, can he build on what he did in the playoff? Because he was thrown into a pretty tough situation and responded. I mean, his team played well in the playoff. They beat Georgia early in the year when Lane was there. They didn't beat him, but they beat him in the money game. They had every chance to beat Miami, and the Sammys didn't get it done. But now he's got to prove it over the course of an entire season. They're seemingly recruiting pretty well. I know he likes his defense, but there are going to be a lot of eyes on him and this program. What happens with this NCAA probe, but what he can do going forward with this program, because you guys know what's going to, if they sort of dip and fall off, because listen, for all what Lane did or didn't do, or the way he left, and it was a messy exit, they won 10 games or more, in 4 of his 5 full seasons. Ole Miss hadn't won 10 games, I think, 3 times in the previous 50 years. So there's a standard there. That fan base has tasted it. And it's going to be on Pete Golding to continue to take it, move forward, and do some damage in the playoff again.
Quick question, man. Do you think this, because I know when I was playing, and I guess still now, right? LSU and Bama became a big rivalry. Do you see Ole Miss and LSU having that type of rivalry now that Lane's there? Because I want to say Coach Saban had a lot to do with the LSU and Bama, battle. Because I remember those bouts, man. Playing against LSU the week before, because we had the bye week, just like how LSU got the bye week before they play us. When it's LSU week, that first phone call you get and all those text messages you get after that is the craziest stuff in the world, because they text me and they harass me for a week strong when we played LSU. And so imagine going through that, having to play them in a bowl game. And
Yeah.
so a month long, people was texting me 24/7, mooning me, doing all type of stuff for the national championship game, playing them again. So I'm sorry, I went off on the edge there, man. I'm still having flashbacks.
Get your therapist for it.
Yeah, man. Man, do you think this is going to be a big rivalry, man, now, on, like, far as games? And, not saying that it's already not, but, now that, it's kind of got a, bigger deal now, with Lane being there and how he kind of left and, how everything was, and now what he's saying in the news now about, being a crazy place to stay at, still to these days. And so you think that's going to be a bigger game, every year now?
Yeah, I do, Trent. And you just gave me a good story idea. I want to start talking to players about the craziest text messages they got from fan bases
Man,
the week before big games. I mean, it's amazing how do fan bases how to get your cell number?
somebody work at AT&T. I know that. They
Somebody knows a girl
yeah.
who knew somebody.
Was it the Bama fans or Tennessee fans that got Stetson Bennett's phone number one year before they played? But I hear that story, the same one you just told, all the time, going back 10, 15 years. Players, remember Connor Shaw, the quarterback at South Carolina? He's in there playing Clemson one year, and he got hundreds of calls before the game. So that happens all the time. But no, to answer your question, yeah, man, this will be a grudge match of all grudge matches. They play in Oxford the third week of the season. Still early in the year. Don't know much about your team. You don't know as much as you will about your team. Lane and LSU have to go in there. And I'm sure Lane will be quiet all week on Twitter. Don't you guys think he'll probably be very tame and docile all week on Twitter?
Uh-huh.
And do you think Lane got the most pressure in this game?
I do. That's a great point. I think there's more pressure on Lane than there is Pete. Now, you know how that works, Trent. Pete loses. Oh, God. How do you lose at home? But I think that this game, with all that's gone on this offseason, all the bad blood that exists, Lane's making $13 million a year. They're going to have a close to a $50 million roster. If he walks in the Vaught Hemingway that third week and loses, it won't be a pretty sight in Baton Rouge. So, yes, I do think there's probably more pressure on him out of the gate than there would be on Pete Golding. Now, you lose that game and it works both ways. But that's a really good point. I've thought about that a lot, that if he does lose that game, then all that's been said, the momentum he's built up in recruiting, the portal, he's hired a great staff at LSU. But then all of a sudden, like, wait a minute, we spent all this money, we get him away from Ole Miss, and he goes into Ole Miss and they beat our butt. That will sit well with the LSU fans. Listen, you talk about that second game you guys played LSU in the Sugar Bowl. I always thought that was, even the first one that year, the overtime 9-6 game was one of the more anticipated games in recent SEC history. And then you played them again, and that was such a major rivalry. I mean, you look at, I did a story, Trent, one time on the number of pro players on both sides.
Yeah, that was
I
crazy.
call that up. I remember Joe Pedri told me one time, he said, there'll be more guys per capita that play in the NFL, that played in this game, than any other game in recent history anywhere.
Yeah.
And I thought that was probably one of the bigger games ever. The Cam Newton game, Auburn, Alabama. Obviously, there was a lot of build up to that game because could Alabama spoil Auburn's run? But man, I don't know that anything rises to the level of just nastiness and anticipation of a fan base that's out for blood, and he has to come back to their place, talking about Lane, this one's gonna be probably as epic as any of them. I just hope it's a good game, and, Lane when Lane went back to Tennessee as was he a coordinator? I guess he came back and was it 15 they came back to Tennessee, and he was a coordinator, and they tried to talk him into I remember him telling me this, wearing a
Flight
bulletproof
jacket.
vest.
Yeah.
You guys remember that?
Yeah.
He wouldn't
Yeah, I
do
do
it, said,
remember
"I'm not
that.
gonna do it," which maybe was a little bit much, but there may be that type of talk because, as you guys know, it only takes every fan base, it only takes one crazy fan. But he'll be he'll be a guy that will be booed. Um, I hope it doesn't get ugly. People start throwing stuff like that. When he came back to Tennessee as the Ole Miss head coach, remember they had to stop the game for 20 minutes because you had a bunch of knuckleheads in the fans throwing bottles and mustard bottles. Hell, a guy threw a golf ball at him. I hope we don't have a repeat of that, but it's going to be. I tell you how Pete Golding has described it to me. He said it'll be an absolute madhouse, and I'd say that's probably
Mm.
right.
Not surprised. Last thing before we let you go, and you've been incredibly gracious with your time. Nobody was closer during his tenure, and I know the relationship has remained with Nick Saban. Your perspective 2+ years in now of Alabama football with Kalen DeBoer as the head coach.
Yeah, I knew Chris, whoever came in, was going to be a tough transition. And you know what? Nick Saban knew it too. I remember talking to him about that. It didn't matter who they brought in. It was just going to be rocky. And I think if you drop someone in from Mars right now and sort of said, "Hey, this is what Alabama's done the last 2 years of football," they'd be like, "Well, it's okay. Not too bad. They won a playoff game last year. They played in the SEC championship game. They beat a bunch of ranked teams. His first year, yeah, they lost some games that Alabama never lost. I mean, hell, Nick won 100. People talk about his accomplishments. He won 100 straight games against unranked teams. You think that will ever happen again in our lifetime? He never lost to people he wasn't supposed to lose to. And I think when Kalen lost to some of those teams, Vandy lost to a pretty bad Oklahoma team his first year. I think that's when fans were like, whoa, and then they end up losing that first game to Florida State and just looked lethargic. But to me, they got up off the ground. That's the key. If you want to assess a guy and what kind of hold he's got on the team, they picked themselves back off the ground and played really good football. Now, they didn't play well against Georgia in the championship game. Indiana boat raced them, but they go on the road and get down double digits to Oklahoma in the playoff and win. So when people say, well, the first 2 years have been a disappointment. Well, if you look at what Nick did, anything would be a disappointment, right?
Yeah.
So I think he has done, in the face of everything he walked into, I think he's done pretty well. Now, this third year will be critical. These guys are pretty much all his guys now. And you go to 9 games in the league, which is going to be harder on everybody. You still only have 12 teams in the playoff. I think getting back to the playoff and being a really good football team in November will be important. You're going to have a first-year starter at quarterback, which is always tricky. But I do think year 3, you want to be sort of doing this, and
Yeah.
you don't want to be doing that. And I think that's the key for Kalen in this program right now is to try to build on going to the playoff and winning a playoff game last year and not having it dip so much. He's just different, it's you get, and I mean this in a good way. You guys know how much I love Nick. You sort of get institutionalized when you work and play under Nick Saban, even the fan base. And Kalen's way of going about things is just different. It just is. And it doesn't mean
Yeah.
it's not going to work, will never work, but there's still a transition period. I think we're past that now. And I think any talk about, going from Saban to DeBoer, that's in the past. We find out, I think, this year, as much as we ever have, what a program at Alabama looks like under Kalen DeBoer.
Only thing I will remind you and others about You're absolutely right. 100 straight victories against unranked opponents. But I was there on the sidelines broadcasting and witnessed two of the most devastating losses he ever had. Louisiana Monroe,
Mm-hmm.
his first year at Alabama, but his first year at LSU, UAB, which was only in about its fourth year, if that many, as a 1A program at the time. So when you're building it, no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, no matter who you are, it takes a minute. But again, he was in the SEC championship game in year 2, Saban was, and
Right.
we all know what happened in year 3.
And
Chris,
he'll,
great.
he'll tell you that championship, that loss
Yeah.
to Florida in 08, when Tebow just sort of took the game over down the stretch,
Mm-hmm.
was in a lot of ways the foundation for Alabama as they built from there and just sort of took off. You know, you got to learn, you got to win those types of games. And Trent, you were right there in a million of them. There are a lot of games that Bama won where you go back and look at it. Maybe they didn't deserve to win, but they did what they needed to do. I mean, look at the last 2 games Nick Saban ever coached against Auburn. Think about that. The last 2 games he coached, both of them on the plane.
Well, I was in that Rocky Top game, that Mount Cody game.
Yeah.
So playing against Tennessee.
Great example.
Here's the other advice I'd give. Get you a Trent Richardson in year 3. That tends to work well. Have a Trent Richardson for your 3rd season.
Run the football, man. They got to run the football. I know that's
run the ball. Run the ball lane. Run the ball lane.
Yeah,
hey,
they got to run it better. But Kalen knows that, and I think that's been a priority and been sort of a point of emphasis all off season. They brought in a couple guys who've been run coordinators on the staff, and I think that's where it starts this year. Is they just with freshman quarterbacks. I mean, come on, you just can't put as much on their shoulders as you put on Ty Simpson's shoulders last year. He was a veteran. He was starting for the first time, but he'd been around. He'd been on campus for 4 years. You know, whether it's Keelan or Russell, or Austin quarterbacking this year, you got to play better, and you got to blow some people's noses in the run game more so than you did last year, or it could be a long season for the Tide.
Chris, you're incredibly generous with your time. Didn't mean to keep you this long and apologize for it, but always good to talk to you. Thank you so much.
You bet, guys. Good to be with you.
Take care. Chris Lowe, On 3, kind enough to join us here on The Dynasty, a podcast on the Alabama Crimson Tide. Wrapping up a busy show here on The Dynasty, a podcast on the Alabama Crimson Tide. Want to remind you again, thedynastybama.com is the hub where you can find the links to YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and all the different podcast platforms. Also, at The Dynasty Bama is where, or is how we hope you'll rate, review, and share all across social media. Wrapping things up, hey, good news for Amari Allen. He's withdrawn since we last talked. I know that's not really new news, but it is since we were last here. Withdrawn from the NBA draft, coming back to Bama for his sophomore year. Hopefully that'll work out the same way it did for LeBaron Philon, helping the Tide to a big year, and also helping him with his draft status and draft stock, and great for the Crimson Tide. Good luck, Bama softball and baseball, as well as softball has advanced to the finals round, the Final Four of the College World Series, and baseball has advanced to a super regional and will host for the first time again in 20 years. But if we're turning back the clock, it's not 20 years, but Trent Richardson, 18 years ago this week, the 28th best prospect in the country. And frankly, I want to know who the other 27 were that were rated higher. But this kid out of Florida commits to the University of Alabama. Young, strong as a bull, Trent Richardson. And this story, I think, up on the screen now from our friends at AL.com. Talk about the archives. State powerlifting competition in Florida. your second?
That was my first year doing it, my junior
Okay.
year. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I got second.
Yeah.
And it's so crazy looking at this quote and looking at what I was talking about. I'm like, dang, I committed right after this, or I guess the situation brought up about being a state runners up, weightlifting, power weightlifting. So in Florida, power weightlifting is a
Big
sport.
deal.
So
Yeah.
so that gave me my fifth sport in high school. I did football, basketball, baseball, track, and weightlifting.
Right.
And so, and what was crazy, football and spring football and track and weightlifting kind of ran in the same season.
So you're going from one to the other
Yeah,
constantly.
I was going from one and to the other, and it was around about track season, and I was playing baseball at the same time, and I had to stop playing baseball because I center slid head first and broke both of his arms. My track coach was like, let's go. We was already late for this track meet. So when I go to track practice sometime, they would have to start practice late because they didn't want to start without me because I was already in when weightlifting was already 7th period, the last period of the day. So I'd be finishing up my workout for the practice for the weightlifting. And before I go out to before I go out to football practice, so they would have to hold up football practice because I had to get my extra workout in.
Yeah,
which was crazy. And I see the quote that we were talking about right here. Man, they had a cat down in I think we was in St. Augustine, but they had a cat. Man, this dude did not warm up. He did not warm up. So I'm like,
he's got out of the car and started lifting.
Man, he just had a Superman shirt, like one of the muscle shirts on. I remember this like it was yesterday. This is almost 20 years ago, y'all. But this cat didn't have no waist. He was like real big up here. Some of the smallest legs. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna get him. Man, that cat came out and started out at 5:30 something for the first lift on the bench. And I'm talking about with no warming up. And he came down slow, and I thought, okay, he finna miss this. Yeah, I'm finna win. He finna miss this. Man, he did this and boop, put it right back. I said, oh my gosh.
I'm done.
He's serious. But what I got him at, what made me in a competition with him, he couldn't power clean nothing. So anything I can almost like throw up on the bench, I can almost power clean and jerk it. But he couldn't power clean like over 250 or 260. And I was really good at power cleaning and jerk. And he couldn't do that. And that's what kind of kept us balanced. But man, like I think he ended up doing like 570 pause press or 580 pause press or something like that on the bench. And it was just crazy. But to see him, to win it that first year, I did it. And won it my second year, my last year, and I actually won the whole competition for all weights, for as the big guys and stuff. I was in the 219 club. And after that, it was like the heavyweights, and I actually won the amount of weight I put up, like for the whole thing. So, man, that was that might be my only state championship that I did have. Far as of a 5-year letter sport guy, that was probably the only one I made it to state in. Well, I made it state in track too, but I didn't win that. Jeff Dimps won that.
It wasn't bad either. Good night. I would love to go back and just watch that competition between the two of you guys.
Glenn Coffey, bro. So me and Glenn Coffey brother Matt used to have to battle against each other because we was in the same class, and so you'll see Glenn at some of these meets and stuff, and I'd be scared to go say something to him. And how Glenn was. Glenn didn't say nothing to nobody. But his little brother had a mouth on him, and man, we used to go in. That was my guy.
Oh, precious memories, how they linger. Great stuff, Trent. Always enjoy it. Thanks, Peter Burns of ESPN, Chris Lowe of On3 joining us. AJ's back next week. Next time, I should say, on the podcast. Huge thanks, as always, to our producer, Steve Gorgie. For all those gentlemen that I mentioned, I'm Chris Stewart. Have a great week. We'll talk to you next time here on the Dynasty podcast on the Alabama Crimson Tide.